In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? It says, "My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you. Because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while, as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed." Make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Sorry about that. Oh, one more? It's not a comedy show, it's a Bible reading. Afterward, as you know, when he wanted to inherit this blessing, he was rejected. Even though he sought the blessing with tears, he could not change what he had done.
Thanks, Charlie. Better luck next time. Now, it was kind of comedic hearing that, but did you get the words there? It was a pretty full-on Bible passage, wasn't it? So we need to unpack that together. But I wanted to start by talking about a TV game show that maybe you've heard before, Family Feud. I don't know if it's still on anymore, but it was that show where contestants had to try and guess the most popular or common answers to survey questions. I think 100 people were surveyed and you had to kind of guess, what would people have answered to this question. So I've got an example here. When 100 people were asked to name an occupation that begins with the letter J, then out of the 100, 62 said janitor. I'm guessing this was in the US, so we don't use the word janitor usually, but 19 said judge, 5 jeweler, etc. You know, if contestants then guessed any of these answers, they'd get points accordingly. And so there's all sorts of questions this show uses. And I thought this one was kind of funny. When asked, name a place that's filled with people that do not want to be there, a place that's filled with people who do not want to be there, then 36 said jail, 10 said hell, 10 said work or meetings, 8 said cemetery, and 8 said church. Apparently hell, death and sitting in church are on par with each other. Anyhow, Family Feud was great at getting you to think about, how do most people answer a question? What word would be the kind of common word that people instinctively choose? But if we take that concept and apply it to a sentence found in our passage today, I reckon we'd get a bit unstuck. Because imagine if Family Feud question was this. Name an encouraging word starting with the letter D that could fit in this sentence. The Lord, something, the one he loves. What's an encouraging word that you'd put in there starting with D? And if you think, 100 people are asked this question, there's a survey done, how do you fill that sentence? What would the common answers be? Perhaps they'd say, okay, the Lord delivers the one that he loves. Or maybe the Lord delights in the one he loves. Maybe you'd think, okay, the Lord directs the one he loves. Or maybe it's the Lord defends the one he loves. Surely they're the sort of questions you'd think people would answer. That's what we'd expect. How likely is it that people would select the word that actually appears in Hebrews 12, verse 6? The Lord disciplines the one that he loves. I don't think many people would choose that, would they? Disciplines? I doubt that would be a common answer given. It's a bit of a shock, isn't it, this verse in the Bible? And it's even more of a shock because it's written to people who are actually struggling in their faith. They're people under pressure, they're under the pump. And it's written as a word of encouragement, according to the author. Hardly feels that way, does it? And especially if you read what comes just before it. Verse 3, it said, consider him, that's Jesus that the writer's talking about. Consider Jesus who endured such opposition from sinners so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, which is therefore, that's not your own sin, no, that's sin being directed at you. In that struggle, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. The people are suffering for their faith, but not to the point of death. They're experiencing sinful, perhaps even violent acts towards them. They've got it bad, but not as bad as Jesus had. And the word of encouragement given to them is, hey, be encouraged. God disciplines the one who he loves. Now, do you get what that actually means? That means that God is somehow behind these sinners who are opposing them. That's even more shocking, isn't it? How is that even possible? Many of us think the universe operates like this. If I'm on God's side, if I'm one of the people he loves, well, he's going to look after me. Everything will go well. Nothing should go wrong. But this is saying, no, those who he loves are disciplined by him. And that discipline can even be sometimes evil being done against them. Now, the whole idea seems strange, if not wrong. And so we've got to get our heads around it today, don't we? We've got to read on, and as the writer kind of fleshes this idea out. So let's do it. Let's take time to think about this idea of God's discipline. And we're going to start with the idea of the privilege of discipline. Because if we actually kind of try and get our heads around, what receiving discipline means, it means, doesn't it, that you are their child. The second half of verse 5 is a quote from Proverbs 3 and reads, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline. Do not lose heart when he rebukes you. Why? Because the Lord disciplines the one he loves and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Now, by the way, that applies to daughters as well. This quote is just using father and son as an example. Daughters are mentioned later. But see the point. Only people who are loved, only people who are accepted are disciplined. It's because they are children. Now, the word chasten actually brings that even more because chasten relates to child training, child instruction. And so if you're being disciplined, well, that means you're a child of God's. Verse 7 continues, endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. You see, true parents discipline their children. That's just part of being a parent. Now, tragically, we know, don't we, some parents discipline their children in over the top and wrong and cruel ways. Their discipline's actually physical or emotional abuse. Don't think of that when you read the word discipline, and I'm sorry, actually, if you've been on the end of that sort of thing. Now, discipline, and think discipline as involving appropriate boundaries. Discipline is fitting consequences for actions. Because we know, don't we, that while over-the-top discipline is wrong, well, to swing the other way and apply no discipline, well, that's actually setting a child up for failure, isn't it? You know, how dangerous are children who have never learnt limits or boundaries? They've never discovered the meaning of the word no. You know, spoiled children or ignored children, they're unlikely to grow up as happy and well-rounded humans. You know, proper discipline is actually one aspect of showing a child genuine love, genuine care. And so, if you receive appropriate discipline, it's actually a privilege. It shows your parents love you, you belong to them. They actually care for you, they're concerned for you. You are legitimately theirs. Now, we know this to be true through our own experience. Verse 9 says this, "Moreover, we all had human fathers who disciplined us and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live?" You know, we know that even though our human parents are flawed, many of them still disciplined us well. When they did it, when they gave us appropriate boundaries and consequences, we can look back and actually respect that. You know, I know I do with my parents. You know, at the time, you know, not so much. I remember hating actually some of their decisions and punishments, but looking back now, they didn't always nail it, but they genuinely got it right. I'm glad actually they loved me enough to say no to me at times, or to make sure there was a cost when I disobeyed. I remember one particular moment I was told that I wasn't allowed to go to a party and hang out with some certain friends of mine. And they said, no, you're not going. And I was raging. I was filthy at this decision. I remember walking into the hallway and just chucking some sort of nana like a 2-year-old, screaming blue murder. But actually, after what went down at that party, I wasn't there, but what I heard happened, I'm actually glad I wasn't there. They got it right. And so if I can see how they got it right, even as flawed humans, you know, how much more will God get it right with us? You know, Psalm 94 verse 12 says, "Blessed is the one who you discipline, Lord." You see, God's going to discipline out of love and care, not out of rage and regret like we sometimes do. Now, at this point, though, you might still have the question of why he disciplines, though. You might say, okay, disciplining means I'm his child. That's great, but couldn't he actually just tell me that? You know, hey, you're my child. Why does he have to send hardships my way? Why do it via discipline? You know, what's the point? Or the question is, you know, what's the purpose of discipline? Well, let's think about, you know, why do parents discipline their children? Well, it's to grow them up to be well-rounded adults, to prepare them for life. You know, they do it as part of teaching right from wrong, or to shape their character. You know, sometimes discipline is about protection, to keep the kids safe from harm, you know, stop them from running out to the road or what might happen at a party. You know, likewise, God has reasons for disciplining us. Verse 10 says, that's our parents, disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. See, God only disciplines for our good. With the good being, we actually get to share in his holiness. His discipline trains us to be holy like he is holy. His discipline produces a harvest of righteousness and peace. You know, discipline's a bit like the spade which digs deeply into the soil of our lives, you know, turning it over, preparing it so that a harvest might spring forth. Or think of Jesus' analogy of pruning the vine, John 8. Discipline is like a vine being cut back so that it can then produce fruit. Now, like it says, you know, that doesn't feel pleasant at the time, being dug through or cut back, but it's producing something in us. You know, he's teaching us, correcting us, transforming us. You know, Romans 5:3 says, suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. Now, that's hard to see at the time, isn't it? But actually, perhaps easy to see in hindsight. You know, have you actually maybe gone through a hardship or a trial, which in the moment was really, really tough, but you look back and you think, actually, yeah, that grew me. Maybe it grew my character or my faith or perhaps my empathy for others. And so because God's our Father, because we are his children, he will use whatever means to grow us, to produce a harvest of righteousness or godliness in us. And just like we don't want parents to turn a blind eye to children's bad behaviour, God refuses to turn a blind eye to our rejection or our rebellion or our stupidity or our sin. He's going to use discipline to get us to pause and think again, or to turn around and go in the opposite direction, or to get down on our knees and repent, or all of the above. And we actually have to be clear. God is not kind of coming to his children sort of late after the attack has happened and saying, okay, the attack's happened, all right, I can turn this around for good. That's not discipline, that is repair. That's the difference between a doctor who plans the incision for our good and the emergency room doctor who sews us up after a freak accident. The text is saying, and this is hard to hear, but it's saying God is the doctor planning our surgery. He's not the doctor repairing our lacerations. His discipline is proactive, not reactive, and it's got a loving purpose, our good. And so that means we're actually called to press into discipline. Verse 12 says, therefore, given all this, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet so that the lame may not be disabled but rather healed. It's a little bit confusing way to put it, but it's just saying, press into discipline. Actually allow it to do its work on you. Remain strong under it. Don't be crushed by it. Rather than let it disable you, let the discipline heal you. Let it refine you. Let it grow you. Actually make the decision under discipline to be holy. Most of us want to be strong without doing the exercise. Or we want to lose weight and be healthy without having to kind of deny ourselves in any way. Likewise, we can kind of want healing and want growth and want holiness, but we just want it without the discipline. We want the fruit without pruning. That's not how God has designed it to be. And when toughness or discipline comes, there's a real temptation, isn't there, to reject and rebel against God. The temptation is to get angry at the God for correcting you, to run away from him instead of towards him. The writer can see this potential. Verse 15 continues, see to that no one falls short of the grace of God, that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. Now, by falling short, that doesn't mean, falling short of a standard. Doesn't mean, not achieving enough to receive God's grace. No, it's not letting the grace of God reach you. You don't come near enough to it to grab a hold of it. And that's because God's grace can't fail, but we can actually fail to depend on God's grace. Rather than receiving his discipline as his grace towards you, you just see it as an unnecessary punishment. You just see it as a cruel God who actually doesn't have your best interests at heart. And then bitterness grows, doesn't it? You become bitter that God is giving you trials. And bitterness is the easy path, isn't it? It actually takes faith to resolve to not grow bitter, to trust God and his plans and his purposes, even when you just can't clearly see it at the moment. Now, another wrong response to discipline is also given in verse 16. It says, see to that no one is sexually immoral or godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Now, if you're not familiar with the story, Esau is found in Genesis 25. He's the firstborn son of Isaac and Rebekah, not the ones that come here. Isaac and Rebekah from Genesis 25, and he held the inheritance rights because he was born just before his twin brother Jacob. One day, though, he came back from hunting and he was totally famished. He was starving. And he was so hungry that he agreed to give up his birthright to his brother Jacob in exchange for some stew. Now, he was actually willing to trade away his inheritance in order to satisfy a short-term pain, a short-term appetite. Now, he later regrets the decision, but it's too late, tears or no tears. Now, why is the writer bringing up this random story from the past? Well, it's because it's a warning. In the midst of short-term discipline, don't trade away your lifelong gift. Don't trade something valuable for something temporary. Don't use hardship or pressure, difficulty that you're under as an excuse to sin and turn away from God. Now, it's possible, isn't it, to do things that bring our character crushing down into ruins, a moment of madness, a snap decision in the heat of the moment that you can't go back on. Don't play fast and loose with sin. Our actions have consequences. And the writer is recognising that under pressure, under hardship, under discipline, under the kind of hunger that Esau had, you might make a dumb decision. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 12 says, if you think you are standing firm, be careful you don't fall. See, how can we respond to discipline? Well, we could respond with bitterness. We could respond by going up, stuff you, God, I'm going to reject you. I'm just going to sin. I'm not liking this. I'm just going to bow out. But we're called, as tough as it is, to see it as a privilege. To see, actually, there's a purpose to this. We're called to allow it to heal you and shape you. And so as we wrap things up, we started by thinking about trying to find the right word to fit a sentence. To finish then, the question for you and I is whether we'll actually accept this word that God has given us. We might not think the popular answer would be discipline. Might not be the answer we would choose, but will we accept that the Christian life at times is going to be a struggle, and it will be rest as well? Will we accept that God will use any means to grow us in holiness and character? If you are willing to believe this, and that's a big if, I get that's a big if you accept this word, it'll actually transform the way you view hardship. You might go even as far as cherishing it. Will you accept the mystery of God's providence in the pain of your life? Will you be transformed by it for good and for peace and for life? Will you submit to the Father of spirits and live, as verse 9 had said? Or instead, will you kick against this word? When suffering comes, will you push against God? Will you put him in the dock and prosecute him with your accusations, demanding answers? He's probably not going to answer you why it's your turn, why it's happening now, why there's this much pain, why is it lasting so long? And so will you instead hear the answer he's already given you? What you're going through is the love of an all-wise father to his child. Will you actually trust him with this answer, with this word? Will we see God's hand in our struggles and our successes? And when we find ourselves thwarted or disappointed or opposed or vilified or enduring something, we actually hear the gentle voice of your Father saying, hey, come and follow me closely. Trust me, I love you, I've got this, I've got a bigger plan here. Will you actually hear from the Father who's, if you think about it, whose love and commitment to you is so great that he sent his Son to die for you? That's the God, the Father who loves you. Now that is tough, I get that. It's not as comedic as Charlie's Bible reading made it out to be. But we need to pray now, don't we, that we'd accept this word. We'd wrestle with it. We'd talk about it afterwards. Hey, do we actually believe this? Will we trust it? Will we accept this word? Let me pray. Dear God, as we read through your word, the Bible, there's so much encouragement, so much joy, so much to give praise for. But as we go through it, sometimes we hit stuff that we genuinely scratch our heads at. It's a tough word to hear, but help us see the truth of it. Help us see that disciplining is a privilege. It means we're your children. Help us see that discipline from you means a greater good. You've got a plan for us. You're not just doing it randomly. Help us trust that. And I want to pray particularly, Father, for people who are going through tough stuff right this very minute. This is a really hard word to hear when you're in the midst of stuff. And so please comfort them, please help them know your love today. Help them know that your love was so great that you died for them. You undertook hardship and mocking and pain for them. And I pray this in your name. Amen.